Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Southern Fried Podcast, a production of the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. I'm Rex Nelson, Senior Editor of the Democrat Gazette, and welcoming in today Tab Townsell, Executive Director of Metroplan, as we're going to talk Central Arkansas, growth in Central Arkansas, the future of Central Arkansas. Tab, thanks for joining me today. Appreciate it.
Glad to be here, and what an honor it is to be on the Southern Fried blog. This is something I've always listened to, and this is quite an honor. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you coming in today. For those who may be listening in on this blog and not familiar with Metroplan, let's start with Basics 101 here. Give them an idea of just what Metroplan is, what it does.
Okay. That's a unpacking, to say the least.
Yeah. I don't want to take for granted that everybody listening to this knows what you do, though.
Metroplan is the planning agency required by the federal government to regulate and help plan transportation inside the North Little Rock, Conway metropolitan statistical area. This is one of those requirements that date back to 1962, when they were putting the first interstate highway system in and everything was great. You were going to be happy motoring across the map a lot easier. Everything was wonderful until they started blowing through the cities, and the national departments of transportation for each state had the right to go through where they wanted to. So to provide a local counterpoint, the federal government in 1962 required for every metropolitan statistical area over 50,000 people to put in a collective body made up of the local jurisdictions of that official region to be a counterpoint. Now, they had a right to call balls and strikes, to veto, you could say, projects with federal money to be spent by the state departments of transportation inside those regions.
Right.
But to do that, they had to help plan and be cooperative with the local jurisdictions and the state government. So we are mandated by the federal government, designated by the state to serve the metropolitan statistical area, and made up of local governments. And that's what we are assigned to do.
Gotcha. All right. Great explanation. Let's dive right into the 2020 census. We recently got breakdowns on this. I devoted a whole Sunday column to it. And let me, for those who are listening, just spit out a few numbers, and then I'm going to get your read on them. Benton and Washington counties, as we know, Northwest Arkansas is the leading growth area, not only in Arkansas, but one of the leading growth areas of the country. Those two counties grew by 105,800 people during the past decade. That's a 28.5% growth in Benton County, a 21.1% growth in Washington County. Fayetteville passes Fort Smith now as the state's largest city behind over Little Rock. Now, the 6-county Little Rock metro area, as defined by the Census Bureau, came in at 748,031. That's a growth rate of 6.9%. Pulaski County, still the state's largest county, 399,125 people. That's a 4.3% growth rate. Faulkner County, 123,498 residents. Saline County, almost exactly the same, 123,416. Saline County's rate of growth over the 10 years, though, quite a bit higher, 15.2% for Saline County, 9.1% for Faulkner County. City of Little Rock passes the 200,000 mark for the first time, at 202,591. That's a growth rate of 4.7%. North Little Rock and Conway, now almost identical in population. North Little Rock was 64,591. Conway was 64,134. Conway, a much faster growth rate, though, than North Little Rock, 8.9% for Conway, 3.7% for North Little Rock. Now that's a lot to digest, but we will start breaking it down a little bit. And I'm going to start with your recent comments to your board, where you in essence said, compared to the previous decade, 2000 to 2010, you thought the bloom was a little bit off the rose in Central Arkansas, and it's something that business and civic leaders in this region of the state should address, because even though it was a growth area, at a time, mind you, when 53 of the state's 75 counties lost population, even though it was a growth area, that growth was far slower than the previous decade. Have I got that right?
I think that's exactly right. Okay. Absolutely. You could say that the icing, we still have some on the cake of Central Arkansas, but we didn't get that corner piece in this census. That corner piece with all that extra icing, that went to Northwest Arkansas. And that, I think, is something that we should take note with. I have, in that same article, I was contrasted with the comments Mayor Frank Scott said in Little Rock, which I don't really think my comments are necessarily a contrast, but a further enhancement of what he said. I think it's great. I think we should, as Arkansans, celebrate the success of Northwest Arkansas and one of our own, so to speak. But we also have to learn from competition. As we're competing with them, if we don't learn from competition, we just get our tails beat every, census with numbers. So we've got to learn. What are the lessons we need to learn, or what I want our board to start thinking about?
One of those lessons that you mentioned, and I harp on this probably too much in columns, and that is the importance of quality of life amenities in the knowledge-based economy of the 21st century. And to repeat what I harp on too much, but in a nutshell, it has been my frustration through the years when I was with Delta Regional Authority, when I was in the governor's office, working in economic and community development, that so many local business and civic leaders were still stuck in what I call that 1950s, 1960s mode of industrial development, where it was all about going out and getting a manufacturing plant and bringing jobs and getting that big announcement that would bring 200 or 300 jobs to a place. And at that kind of industrial recruitment, it still has its place. But the big picture is, in the 21st century, and I think you have said some of the same thing, is what you're recruiting now is not so much companies as talented people. Talented people who could live anywhere, and talented people demand certain things, whether it be good biking trails or cycling trails or craft breweries, or I could go on and on.
Absolutely. I think that's exactly what the message is. And it's always been part of the message. We tended to put the star power in the major industry announcements coming in, to change the world. It's always been something of a general attraction. Let's face it, when you and I came out of school, our generation, we looked to go to Dallas or Houston or Atlanta. We looked to go find our star somewhere else. And so many people did. Barnhill South was a real thing in the old Southwest Conference in those days.
Absolutely it was.
Because it's filled with Arkies that are relocated to
Texas.
Texas.
To the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, right?
So that was what we did. We frequently didn't have a job when we looked down there for employment. We just decided we wanted to go live in Dallas. Our parents' generation did the same thing, but migrating north or out to California. They wanted to go find opportunity. Sometimes you go seeking where you think you'll find your best quality of life. And frequently that's a job, but also becoming more and more a part of our world today is you find your best quality of life in the best quality of place you can find. And I think that's important moving forward. And that's what Northwest Arkansas is doing a great job of. And even as they interviewed people with the results of this year's census, those people up there in the chambers of commerce and the business advocacy groups talked about that quality of life and how they have been for decades enhancing that quality of life up there. And I think it shows in those numbers. Let's face it, the mirror on the wall, when you ask it who's the fairest of them all for this generation of Arkansans, young people trying to go find their home and their careers in this state, the fairest of them all is now Northwest Arkansas.
All right, so outline me a game plan for Central Arkansas to also offer that kind of quality of life, those kind of amenities, to both keep young people who grew up in the multi-county area of Central Arkansas home and to attract new, talented, highly educated young people to come here.
Good example. Now, that's moving away from my transportation expertise into more of a political world.
You were mayor for a long time. You know all about this.
So it's familiar territory. I'm just not getting paid for it.
Yeah, and you were a mayor of a college city, Conway, I might point out.
Absolutely.
How many years again? A long time?
18 years.
18, wow. So you're very familiar with this, so dig in.
Absolutely. First, we lose our pride. We have to say that the person wearing the multicolored robe in our family is up in Northwest Arkansas. We acknowledge it, tip our hats to them, and then we start trying to copy what they do. I've been a long-time believer in you find someone that's doing something well and go steal every good idea you can from them and bring it back and utilize it the best you can in your area. So I believe in that. One of the things that they do very well in Northwest Arkansas, and it's spurred by a region-wide business advocacy group. the Northwest Arkansas Business Council, I think it's its name, is they believe in regionalism.
Yeah,
They
very much
strongly
so.
believe in regionalism. There is no bigger and smaller Mutt and Jeff situation. They kind of are all in it together. And you can see that by the broad growth across the four major pillars and the even more rapid growth in some of the smaller cities outlying those four major pillars, Fayetteville, Springdale, Rogers, and Bentonville. They cooperate together to a degree better than we do. I have long since used the analogy of it's almost like those cities up there as the forerunners in their two-county region as almost being like stair-step brothers or sisters. You can say either way. Fayetteville's the oldest, and 2 years later there comes Springdale, and then there's Rogers and Bentonville. Whereas in Central Arkansas, I describe our family as a little bit more drawn out and separated. You had Little Rock and North Little Rock. Little Rock has been carrying the water for the state, much less the region, for a century and a half. And then through well-documented tribulations over the past 50 to 75 years, they have started seeing a growth of the region around them that previously was just part of small-town Arkansas. So you could say Little Rock and North Little Rock, we're the children of the first spouse. And then the remaining cities around them in Pulaski County, those are the children of the second spouse.
Right.
And then the counties of the cities of the third county, well, those are the children of the third spouse. And they don't necessarily know if they should send a Christmas card to each other, Christmas every year. We have got to put our history behind us and recognize that business looks at the map of where employers come. They don't look at political boundaries.
That's right.
And we have got to work together as a region. Pulling together, yes, the Little Rock has a number of assets. Yes, a number of assets have been drained over the past 50 to 75 years outside, but those are still contributing to the economy by driving in and working and shopping. And, for the outlying regions, they've got to recognize that the success of Little Rock is critical to their success. They can't, take pride in their safety and their clean streets and new facilities and look down and snicker at the missteps that's happening in Little Rock. They can't do that. They've got to pull together in a way they've never really done before. So regionalism is one thing like that. But also, we have got to recognize that we're not going to be succeeding, as you said, with all those formulas of the past. You can't just have great police and fire and great sanitation and great water and be a Class A city. If you grade cities, that's D work, really. You're doing what everybody's supposed to do. What designates the A work, if I would use an academic example? C work, B work, and A work require something above and beyond that not everybody does. And what we're finding in Arkansas is those cities in Northwest Arkansas are building great trail systems, not just the Razorback Greenway, but an integrated trail system to bring people in wherever they live to that central line.
Right.
The craft breweries, all that quality of life, all the different museums. And, yes, a lot of it's funded by private money, but a lot of it's not. So those type of things we've got to pay attention to. Our old formulas of success will not work. But we've got to sit in the same room together and look at each other and agree that we're in this together.
One way you have steered Metroplan is as a transportation planning organization where it's not solely vehicular traffic. For instance, you've done a lot in the Grant area for the Southwest Trail. Talk about that for a couple of minutes, what the Southwest Trail is, how that fits into this overall vision of amenities of quality of life for Central Arkansas.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking me about that, because it is important. Part of that's driven out of this necessity and where we can be the most, add the most value into our region. In addition to getting, the responsibilities of helping plan for the region and calling balls and strikes on federal expense of State Department of Transportation, federal expense of monies in our region, we are also given about $12 to $15 million a year to disperse for projects. Well, $12 to $15 million a year will barely build, if that, a interstate overpass. So we can't really do a whole lot. If we build a big project in your region one year, well, we've got over 30 jurisdictions. It may be a decade before we get back to your region for
Right.
So we can't build roads, but we can build trails. And so we've kind of backed into this idea that we can put more emphasis on these non-vehicular modes of transportation that also enhance quality of life for our area residents by focusing our monies, and we're focusing half of our monies we're getting over a 10-year period to creating a regional bike ped greenway around the region. We're doing that because we can, And we have the scale to do it. And that also, we've learned, helps pull our region together to think more regionally. As we consider a Southwest Trail, we're considering not only Pulaski and Saline County, but we're involving the city of Little Rock, we're involving Shannon Hills, we're involving Bryant, we're involving Benton, we're involving Haskell, then ultimately on out to Hot Springs. So we're involving various communities working together saying, hey, if I take this road and you take that road, we can link up with the trail. So that regional cooperation is at a level we've never really had before. So that's valuable to us, and it's a level that we can be a value adder to our region on and emphasize something that helps get towards what they're doing a very good job with in Northwest Arkansas.
Do you have a vehicle? And I realize, again, by federal law, there are limitations, but you do bring together the elected leadership of Central Arkansas. Is Metroplan a vehicle that can be at least maybe a little bit close to the Northwest Arkansas Council, something that pulls a region together?
We can, in a sense. We can, being a bully pulpit for better ideas, because a lot of what I think we should be doing has to be done at the local level. It has to be done in the cities themselves. By their citizens pulling themselves up from their bootstraps to a large degree. I think that's important, and we can advocate that. However, there's a bully pulpit provided by the economic interest in Northwest Arkansas that the Northwest Arkansas Business Council provides that we really can't do. It's just the gravitas of economic authority that helps weigh into an issue, that helps bring the political leaders together. It's similar to what Joe Ford did with Central Arkansas Water here in Central Arkansas. That he stepped in and said, guys, we're not helping ourselves here. We need to pull this together. And out of that was born the effort to merge the Little Rock and North Little Rock water departments into Central Arkansas Water that serve not just those two cities, but the region in a very effective manner. So I think it's that gravitas that we need to work. And it can't just emerge from Little Rock. It has to emerge from Little Rock, North Little Rock, Conway, Benton, Bryant, Cabot. It has to emerge from the region. And that, I think, is a voice that we've not yet heard fully.
Let me go back. I want to touch on all of your experiences, 18 years as mayor of Conway that we were talking about earlier. You saw tremendous growth in Conway, a city now of 65,000 people. But like Central Arkansas, that growth slowed a little bit in the last decade as compared to the previous decade. So I guess a two-part question. What spurred that tremendous growth in the previous decade, and why did it not continue at that rate from 2010 to 2020?
And that's a very fair question, because there are local issues. But it's just striking that when you look across the board at our region's population numbers, because I was thinking along the lines that Conway and maybe some of the other larger cities are losing that battle between quality of life and purchase value of a home. So they're losing population out the back door to the smaller cities, the wards in Austin and Lonoke County, the Haskells and Shannon Hills and Saline County and Greenbrier and Bologna's in Faulkner County, that they're losing them out because you can get more home and yard and freedom, let the dog run out in those places. And that's a better trade-off for what you're getting amenity quality of life-wise in your Conways and Cabots and Benton and Bryants. However, when you started looking across the line, we showed a complete diminution of growth rates, not just at the large city level, but the medium cities, the small cities, the unincorporated areas down the line that matched each other. Yes, the small cities grew faster than the larger cities, but they still are not growing as fast as they did last decade. So there's some particular things happening in Conway, but I think a lot of the people that originally used to come to Central Arkansas, and by virtue of Central Arkansas, they're coming anywhere in the region, growing all the cities to a degree, they're no longer coming like they once did. That's where the bloom is off the rose sense of what I think. There are some particular issues. I know that Conway has dealt with sewer extensions issues, that if you don't have the sewer mains to tack onto, you don't build the house.
That's right. You can't build a subdivision.
You're not going to waste your land on a 3-acre subdivision when you can put in a 50-foot frontage subdivision. That's just not going to happen. They'll wait till sewer gets there. So you do get some of that, jumping forward and pausing for a while. Sherwood's experiencing some of that same thing right now, where the first, 5 years of this past decade, they were second to Little Rock in building permits, for example. So you're getting some of that there too. But certainly there's things we can do better in all of our cities, such as those quality of life issues, building the better parks, the better amenities, the more beautiful things, going back and making sure our sidewalks and street lights work and are attractive in those areas of town. We've kind of let go.
Yeah.
Because reinvestment in older properties is a major way young families can start building equity early.
And that was going to be my next point. I was going to bring it back to Little Rock now. And again, a little outside your current role as a transportation planner, but back to your many years as a mayor. In Little Rock, I have always, and I have called this city home for 32 years since I moved back from Washington, D.C. to Arkansas. But I have always been a big proponent of infill development. I mean, there are acres and acres in the city limits that are underutilized. The infrastructure is already there. You don't have to run that new sewer line that you're talking about. It's already there. How do we spur more infill development in the state's largest city as opposed to the relentless march west that we've seen basically for the last 30 to 40 years?
Absolutely. I think what you have to do is we by Arkansas Constitution and laws, we cannot as cities put in, give money away, not to private business, not to private individuals. So we have to work within the public realm. So that's why you make sure your streets work. You make sure your street lights work. Your sidewalks are continuous and go places. So you invest back in. Give those places an identity. Make sure the street signs are clean, and maybe put in names of the districts to where you start getting some identity there. And you have to put in enough. You can't scatter your improvements slowly across the whole board. You kind of have to move section by section so you can put in enough to get to a tipping point, that private reinvestment back in, that this is an area that's going to be cared for, to draw that private investment, comes back in and starts sustaining itself. Then you can move on to another area that needs help and has something to tack onto to help extend, like the area around South Main is seeing a lot of redevelopment now, but it's tacking on the regeneration of the South Main area, which is just a spectacular improvement that I had not been down to. It was relatively complete a few years back, and I got a chance to drive it and had not seen it in a decade or so. And it's spectacular. And people drive down through there and think that all of a sudden that house a block off or 2 blocks off of that is a good place to invest their money, because they trust that it's going to be taken care of. And that's how the public investment helps seed the opportunities for private investment to follow.
If we do these things right, and here's the glass half full side of me, Tab, but it's based on facts. There's some real things that are going right in Central Arkansas right now that we can build on. I look to, the massive facility Amazon is building at the Port of Little Rock, the massive facility they're building in North Little Rock at the same time, right off of the Galloway exit. You add the jobs at the facility in Southwest Little Rock, in the old jacuzzi plant. You take those three, between those three, that's more than 2,000 jobs. I went back and researched, and I believe that's the biggest by a single entity job announcement since the Little Rock Air Force Base came here in the 1950s. So that's one. You've got a real chance to become a major logistics and distribution center for Middle America. And then I look at the tremendous growth of our banks. Bank OZK, which has a spectacular new building in far west Little Rock. George Gleason has plans for a whole campus if that growth continues. And then we see Simmons Bank, which has already filled up the old Axiom building in the River Market district that they bought. It's already full. They're looking for more space already. Wow. Those are both now about $25 billion banks. So again, a chance for Central Arkansas to become, not at Charlotte, North Carolina levels necessarily, but truly a regional banking center. So there are two sectors, logistics and distribution and finance, where I think there's some real opportunities for the region there. I
do think so. I mean, we have always been a region that helped the rest of the state develop their businesses. We have a host. If you look at the Arkansas business list of primary institutions in every industry, you see that a lot of primary industries they'll find a good distribution of those businesses around the state. But if you look at those industries that serve business, you'll see a predominance of those industries at the top of the list that are in the Little Rock region. That's the banking, finance, insurance, law. All of those industries that serve other interests are located primarily here because of its long history as the only place to get those services in the state. Whereas the rest of the industries, as you'd imagine, are scattered around where the resources are in a mineral-rich and agricultural state. That's where that is. So
and that's I told people they couldn't get the capital through the Bobby Hopper Tunnel, so that's one thing Central Arkansas is not losing. So one thing you do have, and you just hit on it, is and I'm proud of what's happening in Northwest Arkansas, but for Central Arkansas, you're going to continue to be the government, the finance, and the legal center of the state of Arkansas.
Absolutely.
Those areas.
And primary medical for a number of reasons, although you're seeing quite a bit of growth in the medical community up there, as it should, to serve that region. So yes, you're seeing that. And I think we build on those. I would like to see us encourage more of the entrepreneurial side of things so that we can counterbalance the service with the more entrepreneurial spirit. I think we're getting that in some of these business incubators, a venture center that's starting. I think that the Little Rock Technology Park, all of those help encourage the start of business and a spirit of entrepreneurship. I think entrepreneurship, the benefits of that, you see in Northwest Arkansas to a greater degree than you see those here in terms of the way they're investing in their community, their home region, as it's termed up there, because they recognize that quality of life issue and building the amenities, the Crystal Bridges and the Amazium, the Razorback Greenway, those features they've heavily invested in because of that. And if we want more of that, we've got to encourage more of the entrepreneurial spirit down here. Because it's a different type of mindset that's it's going to drive a business as well as invest in your community. So we've got to do more of that too.
As we wrap up, I mentioned that 53 of our 75 counties lost population in the previous 10 years. We have always been thought of as a rural state. We're still more rural than most states in the country, but the fact of the matter is Arkansas is rapidly urbanizing. There are only 3 real growth areas in the state. That's Northwest Arkansas, the Little Rock metro area, Central Arkansas that we've been talking about, and what I now call the Jonesboro-Paragould corridor, because they've kind of grown together. And, Northwest Arkansas is great, but they can't carry this whole state alone. Tab, I firmly believe as we urbanize, we need all 3 of those areas I just mentioned doing very, very well in the years ahead.
Absolutely. And sometimes you've got to do things in a fashion that maximizes, you've got to play good offense, maximize your offensive capabilities, but you've also got to play good defense. And I think moving forward, the state of Arkansas has to recognize that, that if we are playing defense in many areas in the state to stop further economic and population loss in those areas. We need to do the best we can there. Those folks in those areas are hurting, seeing diminishment of their property values and their life savings. All of that needs our care and attention. But we cannot stop from investing and giving the tools to our counties and cities in those areas that we're doing great in and to help further their offensive capability to perform better in a globalizing world. That's what we think we have to do. I don't know if we get that sometimes coming out of the state legislature and state government, but we've got to give more tools to our counties and cities to be the very best they can be.
Absolutely. Tab Townsell, Executive Director of Metroplan. I have really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rex.
All right. Thank you for joining us for another edition of the Southern Fried Podcast, a production of the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. I'm Rex Nelson. We'll see you next time.